Okay guys, in today's video we're going to be taking another look at VeChain, and we're going to have a look to see what we can see happening here in the short term as well as the long term. Guys, as you get into this, if you find it useful and informative, do go ahead and hit that like button. I really appreciate it. If you're new, make sure you've subscribed, hit the bell, tap on all, and you won't miss any further updates for VeChain. Right, with that said, let's jump into this and see exactly what's going on with VeChain and what might be on the horizon this weekend. Right, so this is the daily chart to start with. We are using USDT as the pair here, and Binance is the data source as always. And one of the things that we wanted to kind of just point out was obviously the run that we've seen onto the upside. We all know what that's been looking like. But also, if I just turn on these visuals for a second, some of the things that could be on the horizon in in the short term, i.e. this weekend. Now, if I do zoom out to that weekly view, I've spoken about this a dozen times already. I'm not going to bore you all by repeating myself, but ultimately, guys, we are looking to rise the price of VeChain up towards that $1 range. That should be, within this cycle, either late this year, beginning of next year, that we should see that before we go into a bear market where we can again dollar cost average some pretty interesting positions on the way back down. Now, when we get into the daily, this is where things actually start to get a little bit more interesting. So obviously, it's good to know where we're going. We're obviously going up towards that dollar range that we can see here within the Fibonacci retracement extension levels, the 4.236 area. It actually shows $1.01. Now, if we did actually drop the price of VeChain any lower than the low that it's already had during this fourth wave correction, then ultimately that will just increase. Let's just hypothetically say it will go down here to about 3.4. If it does, that actually means it will go up to about $1.07. Okay, so I'm not saying that's going to happen, but obviously if it did, then it just means that the rewards later down the line will actually be a little bit higher. So right now we are still looking at about $1.01. Okay, so that's fine. So ultimately, good to know where we're going. Now, obviously, we have our yellow box here. This is the area that we're looking to get a closed candle above, preferably a weekly closed candle. It's the strongest one to kind of signal us on through. And that will basically mean that we are moving on up into wave 5, and the first target there is 42 cents. Now, obviously, we're not anywhere near that at the moment. We obviously do have an interesting buy zone down here that starts at about 5.8 cents. And finishes somewhere down here towards 4.6, which would be the next support level for VeChain. Now, one of the reasons I really wanted to do this video today for you guys is to talk about what downward trend lines we have going with some upward trend lines, and because we could be in for a bit of a painful weekend for VeChain, and this is really apparent when we jump down into our daily, our hourly view, right? So I'm just going to expand this up so you guys can see, right? So we have this downward trend line, okay, and it's been going for a while. It's actually started way up here. Okay, and this upper bound, and then obviously we can see it's kind of come down. Now, ultimately, where we are right now, we're currently trading at 7.7 cents at the point of recording this video. There's a little bit of room to grow. We can push the price of VeChain up a little bit more, just to this level up here. Ultimately, that should then take us right up to this upper bound area of the relative strength index, which means we're going to be due a correction. Now, there's no guarantee that we'll actually rise the price, I should say. Rise the price up to this area of that relative strength index, because we are kind of coming across this resistance band just here. So we could start to see a reversal even from this point here to the downside. And when we throw the volumes on, it's quite obvious here. It's actually when we drill down a little bit closer for VeChain. Now, when we actually had this correction, we could see that that volume was increasing. So we know the sentiment was quite fearful. Ultimately, it was trying to drop as much VeChain on the market as you possibly could because you were scared it was going down lower. You saw this section here where we pushed the price back up because, ultimately we actually pushed down to becoming oversold, right? So there's only one place to go, that is to the upside. So people were buying it. Probably, larger kind of entities or bigger bag holders who have long-term visions. People like me and Chris, for example, some other long-term holders. Ultimately, what you saw here was fewer people buying up VeChain. So the volumes were actually dropping whilst the price was moving up, which meant that our sentiment is still aligned to what we saw on the way down. People are scared to buy, but they're happy enough to sell. Okay, so again, you're selling at the bottom of that particular scenario, specifically if you're down here, and obviously you've got this bounce. Now, what you saw with that, obviously that fearful sentiment has actually shifted and changed, right? So actually we have the volume going up as the price has gone up most recently in the last few hours. So you can see the sentiment shift and change. However, we run out of steam when we come up to this area here. So we're basically coming up to a resistance level just up here around that 7.8 cent area. And ultimately, we started to see a bit of selling volume come in. Now, currently that's actually quite low. So if that stays down nice and low, we potentially could still rise this up a little bit higher to our trend line. But one thing for certain, guys, is unfortunately this weekend we are most likely going to have a correction. Okay, now if the sentiment is the same as what we saw over here and people are more than happy to sell, then ultimately we're going to be seeing the price actually fall down. Now, in an ideal world, we'd actually want 7.8 cent to hold as a good support line. So currently that's our resistance level, and you'll have a breakdown, breakthrough, and then a retest of that area would be ideal, right? But unfortunately, I'm not sure the sentiment's going to support such a thing. Ultimately, you might find that we push up a little bit, and then we go ahead and actually push down a little bit deeper, and we come right back down into these lower areas here, maybe around 7.5 or 7.3. Okay, so we could potentially be right the way back down here if that sentiment in the market doesn't change. And this is just because we need to correct that relative strength index, and we are coming up against resistance at the moment. And of course, we have this downward trend line that is also major resistance. So right now, I don't think we have enough good sentiment in the market to break this trend line to the upside. And I don't think we have enough room on our relative strength index to even get past this line as well. So one way or another, I find this weekend that we are likely to have a bit of a downtrend for VeChain. And again, this isn't going to be long-term, guys. This is something that we're just going to see here and there as, you know, most things are following Bitcoin. I feel Bitcoin's probably going to be on a similar trajectory. I think ultimately Bitcoin's going to pull back, and then therefore we're likely to see many of these altcoins pull back as well. VeChain's no exception to that. It is kind of just going through the step-by-step process that Bitcoin is going through at the moment. But long-term, and again, I say this over and over, but ultimately, you know, we have to have that long-term vision where we are going as a part of the bigger picture, because the bigger picture does show us with some real good opportunities to move VeChain up towards that dollar level. And again, it could go much higher than that. It all depends on so many different factors. But right now, this is what the technicals are suggesting. And now I would be pretty happy with that. I would also be happy with, you know, a 50, 60, 70 cent VeChain. And, you know, one of the things that you've got to kind of do, guys, is make sure that you have your exit strategies planned out well in advance, so you know which points you're selling before you even get there. Ideally, you would have an exit strategy mapped out before you even invested in a cryptocurrency. Now, when I actually pull this down into our daily view, the other thing that I really want to talk about is obviously knowing that we are likely to move up during the second half of this year, beginning of 2022, then actually, you know, there's opportunities to dollar cost average better positions. Now, my bag is pretty well packed, as is Chris's. However, there are some opportunities, and I thought it was important that we kind of flag them. So when we actually take a look at the chart here, we also just put this box on here. Now, this is an area that we've only had one wick into, okay, since the correction. And this opportunity hasn't actually come around since here, which was the 19th of May. Otherwise, you're back in this area pretty much in March, right? It was around March time. So this area here is if you're looking for a decent price on VeChain and we were to have a pullback, this is an interesting area. There's no guarantee that we'll come back into here because there is an upward trend line, as you can see. Okay, this upward trend line means that we're not likely to potentially fall down lower than that trend line into this yellow box. But if you did happen to enter this yellow box area here, which again comes in at about 5.9 to 4.6 cent, this, even though I've got a fully packed bag of VeChain, would be dollar cost averaging more, because the VeChain, guys, is one of those projects that is doing so much in the real world. It's hard to think that this thing is not going to be absolutely massive in the next 5 years. So as a long-term investor, thinking just above and beyond the 2021 bull run, but you know, the 2025 bull run, you know, to dollar cost average positions like this, which you may never see again, would be, you know, quite a phenomenal opportunity. So for me, this is an area that I would be taking advantage of. And I thought it was important that I also let you guys know there's no guarantee that we'll come back into this area. But if we did, this is definitely an accumulation area that I'll be taking advantage of. And again, there are 2 additional areas that has the possibility of falling down into. Highly unlikely, but it's possible, which would be 3.4 cent. And then obviously the most unlikely scenario of 2.3 cent. With that being said, all of these opportunities in here are going to be fantastic purchasing opportunities for VeChain, because ultimately, guys, we are looking to head up towards this dollar level. And if you were to actually have the opportunity to buy VeChain down a little bit lower towards those, let me just get that out of the way, down towards this area here. Let's say hypothetically it went to that worst case scenario of 2.3 cent. That would put us up at $1.11 at the top end there. So again, huge opportunities are here for VeChain if you choose to see them. And for me, I thought it was important that we talk about what is going on with our current patterns, the likelihood that we are more than likely going to pull back from this downward trend line that's been forming here. And if we were to fall down any lower, there's an interesting accumulation zone that I will be taking advantage of, and I thought it was important that I let you guys know that as well. Hopefully you found this brief update on VeChain useful and informative. Brace yourselves for an emotional weekend. With that said, hit the like button. I really do appreciate that if you found it useful. And if you're new, make sure you're subscribed. By subscribing, you will be kept up to date with everything. Tap the bell, hit on all notifications, and apparently YouTube will send you a notification and you won't miss any more VeChain updates. With that said, done and out of the way, guys, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.